Hello and welcome to Louise Singleton Creations. In today's video I will be returning to Aqua Cast TURBO, the newest eco resin addition to the Elichem range. As its name suggests, Aqua Cast TURBO is very fast to cure, but that's not the reason I'm using it today. Another wonderful thing about it is it's very white when it's mixed. It's the crispest white I've seen in an eco resin, and that is what I need for today's project. So let's see how it turns out. Before I start on today's projects, I thought it might be a good idea, just for a change, to show you the process I go through every time I get a new mould. I always tell you how easy it is to find the volume, but I never show you, so I thought it was about time I did. All you need to do to find the volume is put your mould onto your weighing scales, make sure your weighing scales are set to 0 and then fill it with water. And then take a note of how many grams of water filled that mould. It's best to do it at the sink because obviously you're filling that mould right to the top and it can be a bit messy emptying it, but I had to do it at my desk because I was filming. I've got it on a tray, so I'm not too worried there about whether the water goes everywhere. So I've done it again. I've put the lid mould on there. I set the scales to 0 and once again I'm filling it with water and making a note of the volume in my notebook. In a moment, we're going to input those volumes into the Aqua Cast calculator. One tip I would give you is to add 5 grams to the number you got when you weighed your, volume of your mould, because the Aqua Cast calculator tells you exactly how much water and powder you need to mix up. And because it's exact, you will find yourself scraping every last bit out of your vessel that you've mixed in to fill your mould. So I always just like to add an extra 5 grams on there before inputting the information into the calculator. So the eco resin calculator, which I've been speaking of, is on the Elichem website. If you choose the eco resin that you've purchased and that you're using and go onto that page and scroll down, you'll see the calculator. And then all you need to do is put in your mould volume where it says mould volume. Make sure you've selected the correct product, and there you can see it's Aqua Cast TURBO, which is what I'm using today. And underneath it will tell you exactly how much powder and how much water you will need. So then you can write that down on your notes. Normally on the calculator it says powder plus and then water. Here you might be able to see it says activator, and the only reason for that is because it's the same mixing ratio as the hydroflow, which you can also get from Elichem Resins, and because they're both the same mixing ratio, they've added the Aqua Cast TURBO into the same category as hydroflow. Hydroflow has an activator, Aqua Cast just has water, so don't be confused by that. Where it says activator, just that means water if you're using Aqua Cast TURBO. With all the measurements written down, I was able to start measuring out my water and then my powder. Aqua Cast TURBO is measured by weight, which makes it nice and easy. After measuring, I gave it a really good stir for about a minute. It doesn't take very long at all to create that beautiful creamy consistency that you get with Aqua Cast and Aqua Cast TURBO. Once mixed, it was time to add the pigment. I wanted to go for quite a dark green for my jar, and so I chose Zen Green from Homeware Design. A lot of people like to add the pigment to the water before they add the powder in the mixing process, but I prefer to add it afterwards. I just find you have more control over your finished colour that way. You can add a little bit at a time, see how it looks and add more if you want to. When my Aqua Cast Turbo was ready, it was time to pour it into the mould. Here you can see I've got my mould on a dental oscillator, or you might know it as a vibrating plate. You don't need one of these. It's something I treat myself to see if it would help to reduce the bubbles in the eco resins that you use, whatever eco resin, you're likely to get some bubbles trapped in there. So I thought the vibration would really help. And so that is why it's on there, but you don't need one. After 20 minutes, it was time to take it out of the mould. That's the wonderful thing about Aqua Cast Turbo. You can demould after 20 minutes or even less sometimes. So this mould, I haven't mentioned it yet. It's from Nicole. It's the Camellia jar mould. And as you just saw, it has magnetic mould housing to help it to keep its shape. And it's so easy with those magnets in there. So here it is out of the mould, and you might be thinking, oh my goodness, why is it so patchy? Well, I think I maybe put a little bit too much pigment in there, but the other thing is it's only just cured. When we go back and look at it at the end of this video, you will see what it looked like the next day, and after it had had time to dry out, it was much less apparent and a much more consistent colour all the way around. Next, it was time for the lid, and it was exactly the same process as before, so I didn't show you all the weighing out of the water and the powder. So this time I'm just keeping it white, and that's actually the reason why I chose to use Aqua Cast Turbo. I wasn't in a rush, which might be the initial reason you would want to use Aqua Cast Turbo, because you want it to be really a quick process. I wasn't bothered about that. I'm quite a patient person, and I would be happy to wait for an hour instead of 20 minutes for my demoulding. But the reason I'm using the Aqua Cast Turbo is because it's such a beautiful bright white. And here I'm actually adding some white mica powder. I just wanted to see if I could get kind of that pearlescent look that you get with mica powders, a little bit of glitteriness in there. It didn't actually make any difference as far as I could tell, so I won't bother with that next time. I was just having a bit of an experiment. Once mixed, it was time to apply it to the mould. Now, this mould is very, very detailed, and I will say now, don't do what I'm doing now with a paintbrush unless it's a very old paintbrush. I ruined that paintbrush by doing this. Even though I put it straight into water afterwards, it was ruined. But I was just trying to get it into all the little nooks and crannies. And I just thought the brush would be a good idea, but it really wasn't. Just do lots of squeezing from underneath and lots of tapping and lots of banging on the table to dislodge any bubbles that are in there. After 20 minutes, it was time to take the lid out of the mould, and I was so excited. I knew it was going to be pretty. I could just tell from looking at the mould. I hadn't seen a picture of this mould. This mould was very kindly sent to me from Nicole. It's one of the newer ones. And sometimes I prefer to not look at the picture online. I like the surprise you get when you get it out of the mould. And I wasn't disappointed. Look at that detail. Oh my goodness. Now, of course, I could have added some mica powders to the mould in the middle to have a nice yellow centre, but I really wanted to go with the natural look and keep it all white. That was just the picture I had in my mind and how I wanted it to look. Now, you will notice on the close-up, once you've stopped looking at that beautiful detail, oh my goodness, that texture, you will see I did get a few little pockets of air trapped in there. It's unavoidable. It does happen from time to time. And so I needed to rectify some of the more noticeable bits. Yeah, there's another one. But it's easy to solve that problem. Let me show you. In a small pot, I mixed up a tiny amount of the Aqua Cast Turbo and some water, and I just kept adding a little bit more powder until it was the right thickness. I didn't want it to be too thin. I wanted to use it as like a filler, and so I wanted it quite thick. not too thick. Obviously, Aqua Cast Turbo cures very quickly, and when you're doing small amounts like this, it tends to cure even faster. So time is of the essence when you're doing this. So once I had it mixed, I used a micro brush and applied it to the different areas where I had the holes. And I'm sorry I'm almost out of frame a lot of the time when I'm doing this. I hadn't checked where my camera was properly. But anyway, you can just about see me filling those gaps, and it's very easy. And if you just smooth over it with your finger after filling the gap, it just seems to work nicely to do it that way. So yeah, that's a very easy way of filling in any holes that you're not happy about. Anyway, after I demoulded my lid, I loved that flower so much, and I thought it could be a work of art just by itself, as you know, a piece of wall art if it was mounted in some more Aqua Cast. And so I decided I wasn't going to use that flower as the lid for the jar. I would do another one later on for the jar. I wanted to try out my idea, so I took some Aqua Cast. This one isn't actually Aqua Cast Turbo, it's just the regular Aqua Cast. I didn't have much of the turbo left and I didn't want to waste it. And so, yeah, I had loads of Aqua Cast. That's why I'm mixing that. So I'm going to be colouring this the same colour as the jar with the Zen green pigment like I did before. And then I poured it onto the base of a large square mould I have from Moulds and Shapes, just enough to cover the base. I wasn't sure how deep it could be to put the flower in. So yeah, I did it a little bit at a time to be on the safe side. And as you can see from the shaking screen, I'm giving it a good bash on the table. So I was a little bit nervous doing this, I'm not going to lie. Yeah, I wasn't quite sure how this would go, but it did actually go okay. What I had to do once that flower was in there is just add a little bit more. I just wanted the Aqua Cast to go up to cover the base of the lid, which is under the first lot of petals, to anchor it into the Aqua Cast, and I didn't want to go too deep, but I still needed to tap the table a little bit to even everything out and make it nice and level. There was a little bit of bleeding that went on. The pigment from the green pigment did bleed into some of the petals a little bit, but luckily it wasn't too bad. Let's have a look at it when it comes out of the mould. And there it is. I think it looks really pretty. Yeah, you can see some of the places where the colour did start to bleed into the white a little bit, but I think I just about get away with it. And yeah, once I sanded down the edges where it was just sticking up a little bit and needed smoothing down, it looked a lot better. And so here are my two finished pieces the next day. I haven't sealed them at this point. I wasn't sure what to use. I loved it the way it was and I didn't want to darken the colours. So at this stage they're not sealed, but I do love them. Don't they look lovely? And you will see when the angle changes that the patchiness of the jar base isn't as bad as it was when I first demoulded it. The colour has really evened out nicely, and so yeah, I think they make a really nice pair sat together like that. Here's a closer look at the jar look. You can still see that slight unevenness in the pigment, but it's not anywhere near as bad as it was. And as you know, I wanted to keep mine very, very simple, but I think you can use your imagination and think of different ways you could colour these to make them even more beautiful, especially if you put some yellow or orange in the centre. So what do you think? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. If you've enjoyed the video, please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you would like to. If you're interested in any of the products I've used in today's video, the links and discount codes will be in the video description. Thank you for watching and bye for now.